Okay, cool, awesome. Hi everyone, this is the Instagram filter workshop. We probably won't be able to get through all three in this whatever remaining time that we have left, but it'll be fun. So the first section of the workshop is me describing the layout of the Spark AR desktop application. If you haven't downloaded that already, I highly recommend you do so. And I'll basically go through all the different sections and like what each part of the interface is. And then we will jump into creating the first filter, which is a randomizer filter. I would say it is the most popular kind of filter out there because it's pretty simple to build. So yeah. And then the second filter we're going to do after that is a bit more complicated. It leans more towards the aesthetic side of the Instagram filter category. So yeah, let's get started. So as you can see on my screen, there's a left-hand side, a middle side, and a middle section and a right section. This main section is called the viewport. And it's basically where you can see your effect as you build it. You can see that there's a repeating video playing in this iPhone screen thing. And this is called the simulator. And it represents your device screen. It represents any device screen that will potentially use it in the future. And this is also how you can preview your effect without exporting live in this application. And there's two ways to use this. First is simulating orbit. And so this actually moves the main viewport of how you can view objects in a 3D space. And then you can also simulate touch. So if you have any touch functionality, it can be simulated here as well. So yeah, that is the simulator. You also notice that at the top here, there are a couple buttons. They basically allow you to move any objects that you have easily. You can move, rotate, and scale objects. Cool, awesome. So the left-hand side is called the scene panel. And this is basically a hierarchy of all the different objects that you have in your filter. And then the layers tab is how the objects are being layered on top of each other. Sort of like if you use, you like send things to the back or send things forward. It's basically the same thing as this. So yeah. And then below the scene and layers panel is the assets panel. And this is where you upload any of your assets, your images, your 3D objects, anything that you use within the scene hierarchy. And then let's see, to add an asset, basically click this, and you can either import from your computer, you can search the AR library, create a material, write a script, etc. And then adding an object is the same thing. It gives you a list of options that you can use. And then lastly, I would say this is the patch editor. And this is where all the logic happens, non-script. And so if you've ever used MIT's Scratch, it's basically the same thing. You right-click, and there's a bunch of different things that you can import. So let's say for this example. And it's a little patch that you can move around and move your lines to other patches. And so the left-hand side is all the inputs and the right-hand side is all the outputs. And yeah, lastly, I would say to preview your effect, you can send it to your Facebook or Instagram app once you have signed in. And it will show up onto your app as a notification where you can use, where you can like demo the effect. So that was a very quick introduction to the Spark AR layout. Anyone have any questions before I get started on the first filter? Awesome. Can these be used on Instagram and Facebook? Yes. So once you've uploaded your filter, which you can do by clicking on this upload and export. Usually what I do is I export the file and then I go to a site called Spark AR Hub. It's the place where you can upload and manage all of your effects, and I can show you that at the end. But once you submit your effect/filter on that platform, it will be reviewed by someone, and if it's approved, it can be put on either Instagram or Facebook. So yeah, cool. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is import all the assets that I need for this randomizer. And so I already have a bunch of different assets that I can use. You can go onto Google and find like a bunch of different assets for yourself as well. Let me just pull mine up. And I'm just going to drag these in here. And you can see these are all PNG images of some of the MLH coaches that are on the team. And so this is the title image of the sequence. And these are just a bunch of other people that it will cycle through. And so once you've like dragged and dropped your textures into this assets panel, these are available to use throughout the entire rest of the application. But what we really want to do is change this into a sequence of images, because that's what a randomizer is. It's not actually like determining the result based on any characteristics. It just cycles through the images and randomly selects one to show at the end. And so these currently are all individual single textures. And what we want to do is highlight all of them and change this into a texture sequence. It's going to take a bit. There we go. So now we have this texture sequence. I'm just going to call it sequence randomizer. In order to use this texture sequence, we actually have to create an asset called an animation sequence. And we just select that specific texture. And as you can see, there's also different controls that you can do. You can loop, randomize frames per second, but we currently don't have to worry about any of those. And then lastly, I would say we just need to create a material. And a material is a way to interact or to use these textures within the scene. You can't directly access the textures in the scene without having it correlate to a specific material. So I'm just going to call this sequence shader type flat. That basically means there are no light interactions, because in the scene there is directional lights, spotlights, etc. But we don't want that to actually affect the image, so we click flat, and then we choose that animation sequence that we made before, and now it's ready to be used. And so that is actually all the materials that we need. We're going to go into the scene, and we are going to add a face tracker. What this basically does is anything underneath this object will be tracked to the moving face. And underneath that, I'm just going to create a null object. And this is just basically, it doesn't do anything. It just like houses all the different components underneath. Cool. Underneath that null object, we are actually going to create a plane. And this plane is like a 2D object, basically, that follows the face because it's under the face tracker. This is where we will actually attach the sequence that we have. So I'm just going to call this sequence. And I'm going to click the material that it's going to be related with, sequence. So as you can see now, it's just like going 24 frames per second continuously. So I'm just going to pause this for a second. So yeah, that's the first step. I actually just realized I made a mistake. I'm going to return these to become single textures for a second. We actually need this title sequence, the title image, to be separate because that will be displayed whenever the randomizer is not going. So cool. We have our title and then the rest of the sequence separated, which means that we also have to create a material for the title. This will also be flat, and we get to choose that title texture. Cool. So underneath the sequence, we also need to create another plane for the title and attach that material. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to explain some stuff here. We have the face tracker, and underneath that face tracker is a null object, which doesn't do anything. It just houses different components. And underneath that, we have two planes. The first is a sequence, which cycles through all the different variations of the images that we have. And then we have one dedicated just to the title. The order of the scene actually matters. So it is all the objects are generated from top to bottom. And so this sequence will be generated first, and then this title will be generated second. And because the title is generated second, it will be displayed on top. So if I move this above the sequence, this means that the title will be generated first and the sequence will be generated second. And so the sequence will be shown on top. Yeah, cool. Anybody have any questions so far? If not, I can continue going. So that is everything that we do on the scene panel and on the assets panel. Now we literally do all the logic that's needed within. So what we want to do is once the user starts recording on Instagram with the filter on, then we want the filter to be activated. And so what we do is we drag this camera into the patch editor, and you can see it has various different functionality outputs: front camera active, back camera active, photo captured, and video recording. Video recording is what we want. And so we're going to delay for about 1.5 seconds. And this will come in handy because we want to show the title sequence just for a little bit before it gets into the randomizing aspect. And so from the delay, we want to send a pulse, which is like a signal, to indicate that the title needs to turn off after 1.5 seconds. So I'm going to hook that up to a switch and then a knot. Then I'm going to go to the title here and click this little yellow icon next to visible and attach that there. So this logic is basically saying for the duration of 1.5 seconds after video is recording, the title will not be visible, which means that anytime before 1.5 seconds and anytime during the 1.5 seconds, the title image will be shown. And then after the 1.5 sequence, we want the sequence to be shown. And so we click the yellow arrow there when we bring that after the delay of 1.5 seconds. So as you can see right now, as it is right now, only the title is being shown and the sequence is not being shown. If we started recording, the title will stop being shown after 1.5 seconds, and then the sequence behind will be shown. Awesome. So that's half of the logic that we need. The next set is actually incorporating that randomization. So to show you guys how that would work, actually, we're just going to turn the title off and just show the sequence for a second. And we're going to add a patch called runtime. This is basically the runtime of your filter once it's started. And we're going to connect that to an offset patch. This offset patch is pretty important because we can incorporate, once the pulse is turned on, we can reset this to get to become 0 again, and then connect that to a less than patch. What this does is any functionality after this less than patch of less than 2.5 seconds will be executed. But we only want that to be executed when video is recording. But we only want that to be executed after video is recording and 1.5 seconds. And so that's why we have it connected to the pulse after the delay, connected to the reset. Cool. Now to the actual looping animation. We're going to connect this less than to a loop animation patch. And we're going to say that each specific sequence image that rotates is going to be shown for that amount of time. And then we're going to randomize all of those options between 1 and 13. I mean 0 and 13. And then we floor this value because it's not an integer. And then we connect that to our animation sequence frame. Okay, let me deep dive into the logic of this again, overall. So runtime is when the filter starts running and it counts up the seconds. So if I play this, you can see that this value offset is just continuously going to increase. And we want to reset that to 0 once video is recording, so that whenever it's whatever happens after only happens for 2.5 seconds. And within that 2.5 seconds, we loop an animation with each specific sequence image with that amount of time. And then we randomize it between 0 and 13. We floor that value, and then we attach that to the current frame. So yeah. If I connect these back, you can see that only the title sequence is shown. But once I start recording, this should work. So I'm going to actually export this to my phone and then show you guys what it looks like via my app.
While you do that, Chris, we actually had a question in the chat about being able to use the filters you make in Spark AR with Instagram and Facebook. And if you wanted to go into that, seeing as there's an option right there.
But yeah, I actually did before I started. But yeah, you can upload them to both Facebook and Instagram. It's just an option on the hub dashboard that you upload it to. Cool. So this is, oh shoot, I need to have it be where because it's face tracked. How would I show this? Does this work?
Yeah,
Okay.
We
You know what?
pretty decently.
Oh, it does?
At least I can. I can see the white box on your face.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So when I press record, it's not going to do anything for 1.5 seconds, but then it's going to cycle through that sequence and land on one of the images that we have.
You can see it.
And so yeah, that's a randomizer sequence. And that's the end of this specific filter. If you guys want, I can, after this, share a Google Drive folder of a completed version for you guys to play around with. But yeah, that's it for this one. Cool. I'm going to discard this and reboot it so we can start the second one as well. Cool. Let me just pull up my completed one for a second.
When you get the chance as well, it looks like some familiar faces know you in the chat.
Hi, y'all. Cool. Let's get started on the second filter. So the second filter is called a palette. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to have some boxes in the corner that will change color based on what is presented within the camera view. And we're also going to change the color of the camera as well, since that is a very popular kind of filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my textures in just like last time, as these will be used throughout the rest of the application. So what these are, the first four is dust. As you can see in the sampling, it's like white specks. And this adds like an aesthetic VHS vintage kind of aesthetic. We're gonna make sure these are not compressed. And just like last time, since we want these to be cycling, we're gonna change this into a texture sequence. And then a LUT is a image like this that basically defines how red, blue, yellow, etc. A camera texture is. So yeah. And then we're actually going to go to the camera and then extract the camera texture. This camera texture is basically what is being shown here. If I like changed it to this, that would be the camera texture. So yeah. And then what we're going to do is create another animation sequence just like last time for the dust. And then create materials for everything because that's what is needed in order to access the textures within the scene panel. So we're going to call this map LUT. change this to flat, and then we're going to choose the LUT texture. Then we're going to create another material called matte dust, change this to flat, and add the dust texture. And that is all for now. Now we're going to go into the scene and create some boxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a canvas and then create a rectangle under that canvas. The reason for that is you can't create any rectangles without a canvas, so that's why you need to add both. We're going to have the box, this first canvas be a bunch of different boxes. So we're just going to name this box 1. And we actually want 5 of these. So I'm just going to duplicate this a bunch of times. And so now we have our 5 boxes, and they're all positioned at 0, 0, so they're all overlapping each other. If I move this 100, you can see that it changes within the viewport. And we need to scale these down to be smaller boxes, and then we also need to position them on the right side of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of them, and we actually want them to be smaller. So I'm just going to do scale 0.5. There we go. And then have this first one be at the 275 pixel mark. Actually, we want all of them to be at the 275 pixel mark. So let's just do that. On the second box, we want it to be displayed and not overlaid on top of an existing box. So we're going to move it down 60 pixels. And then we're going to move the third one down even more, 60 pixels. And so on and so forth. Okay, that's not the right number. 240, that's right. Cool. Now you can see we have a canvas of 5 boxes, all at the position, X position of 275, and then with different varying Y positions so that they're stacked on each other on the right corner of the screen. Awesome. So next we are going to create another canvas, and we're going to call this dust. And we're going to add a rectangle underneath that. We're just going to call that dust. I'm going to attach the material that we made before, matte dust. And so we actually want this to be the entire length and width, height and width of the screen. So we actually click within this field on the right sidebar, fill width, and then fill height. And like I mentioned before, because this is generated after the boxes, it's overlaid on top. So if I put this before the boxes would show up. But if the dust is after boxes, they won't show up. Cool. So this is not actually the kind of effect that we want. We just want the white particles, or we just want the particles themselves. So we're going to go to the dust material. We're going to change the blend mode. There's a bunch of different options. You can add it. You can associative alphabet. You can multiply it. You can screen it. But what we want to do is we want to subtract it. And there you can see the little black particles. They're kind of a bit too strong, so we're going to turn the opacity down to, let's say 25. Just a sort of tiny bit of aesthetic vibes, but not too much. So that is the dust. And the last canvas that we need to make is a LUT canvas. Basically same thing as dust, except we're changing the color instead of adding something on top. So we're gonna choose the matte LUT material that we created earlier. Okay, that's not right, actually. We actually need to remove this because we don't want to actually like take that texture and just put it on there. We have to do some calculations with it. And I guess that's a good segue into patches. So the community, filter community, has a bunch of people that make patches that basically do a bunch of complex logic for you. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add a color LUT patch. And so what this does, it takes this like grid thing, and it actually implements it into a color change. And that will make more sense once I go to the patch editor and show you guys. So we're going to drag this patch into the patch editor, and we need a texture and a LUT. So that's why we exported the camera texture, so we can move it also into the patch editor and attach that. And then we actually pull this LUT out as well and put that into the LUT input of this patch. And then now there's an export of a texture, and that's actually what we need in this material. So we click this yellow button, and then we put this in here. And now we can do this fill screen. And as you can see, it's a different vibe. Like if I removed it and hit it and then added it back, you can see the color difference between the original camera texture and this new filter, basically, that is applied. But as you can see right now, the boxes disappear, which is not what we want. So we're actually going to move this above the boxes so that the boxes and the dust are visible. So yeah. And the last part is actually changing the input of all these boxes to be colors displayed within the viewfinder, the camera texture. So what we're going to do is there is a patch called Texture Sampler. And as the description says, it samples a texture at that specific coordinate. And so what we're going to do is it requires a texture input, and we actually want the texture input to be the new colored camera. So we're going to attach that there. And the UV defines the area of the screen that it samples that texture from. So 0.5 and 0.5 will be the direct middle. But what we want, since there's 5 of them, is we're going to have the first one be 0.2. Oh my gosh. There we go. The second one to be 0.4. By the way, I'm Command C, Command Ving these patches right now. I'm changing this to 0.6, 0.8, and 1. I'm going to hook up the texture from above into all of these patches. And now they're ready to be hooked up to the boxes. As you can see, the LUT has a material for LUT. The dust has a material for dust, but we don't have materials for each box. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to call this matte box 1. Just duplicate this a bunch of times because we need 5 of them for the 5 boxes. We're going to change these all to flat. And then we're going to hook these up to each specific box. So box 1 has the material matte box 1. Box 2 has the material Mapbox 2, and so on and so forth. Cool. So now all the boxes have their individual material, and all the materials are currently flat. And because there's no texture, it defaults to the default color, which is white. So that's why you can see that they're all white here. But once we attach these texture samplers to the actual texture, these will change. So I'm just going to line these up. And once I start hooking them up, you can see the colors start to change. So as you can see, this top box is actually taking a color from here, this one from here, this one from here, this one from here, and this one from here. And so as the person moves, the color of the boxes also change, which I think is pretty cool. And that is it for the second filter. The third filter is actually one of my favorites. It's the slit scan, one of the very popular trends on social media. But we don't have time for that, but I can definitely share that Google Drive link with y'all so you can play around with it. But yeah, before I end this, I'm going to show you how to upload a filter onto Instagram and Facebook. So I'm just going to exit out of this and just go to a tab. Cool, awesome. So I'm going to go to a website called Spark AR dashboard. This is the link here. Log in. Okay, my Facebook account was actually hacked yesterday, so I have to change. I changed my password. Cool. So this is your dashboard. And this is where you manage and see all the insights of your filters. So for example, on mine, you can see my impressions for the last 28 days. Opens, which is how many times they are opened, the amount of times they're captured, and the amount of times they are shared. But to publish an effect, you would go here, publish effect. You'd give it a unique name. You would upload a file. And this is a file that you export from the application. And then you can choose what platform to have it go on. So you can have it automatically go to both platforms, Instagram or Facebook, or you can choose a specific platform that you want. And then you select different categories that is applicable and add keywords as people search a lot of different things in the filter gallery. You add a demo video, icon, instructions, and then you submit. And once you submit, it takes about 5 days to be reviewed. They'll either come back saying it's approved, it's live, or it's rejected, and then you have to resubmit and make changes. But yeah, that's how you upload your filters. And I think that's all the time I have. Thank you for following along. I'm actually going to right now post a link of the Google Drive folder that I have with all 3 filters complete for you to mess around with. And thank you for having me.
Do we have any questions from anyone in the chat about the filters we made? I guess I have one. Chris, how'd you come up with your gibberish filter last year?
So I like watched a bunch of YouTube, and this one set of YouTubers like played this game called Incoherent, and I was like, that would make a great filter. And so I made it, and I published it, and I actually shared it to the YouTubers that I watched. I just DM'd them on Instagram. And they actually replied, and they actually used it, which made it to spiral into like everywhere. So yeah, that was pretty cool.